Hello, everyone. Today I'll give you a brief overview of the risks and solutions for civilians in case of a nuclear strike. So you have statements that were made this Monday, April 25th by Sergei Lavrov, who is the foreign minister of Russia. So these statements stipulate that we would be, for Russia at least from the point of view of Russia, in the Third World War, and that the nuclear risks of nuclear war would now be very present. So first we need to identify the threat. So I have to tell you that the threat today, it is credible, and that it has never been as credible on our territory. So I'm not going to go into the details, but the weapons we could potentially face today are thermonuclear weapons, which are nuclear fusion weapons. Obviously, there are many other types of nuclear weapons, but to start with a reasonable and solid base for thought, we'll say that the standard would be a 20 megaton oceanic nuclear warhead. So if these threats were to materialize, this would be the type of strike we might endure. You have what are called tactical nuclear weapons, which are obviously less powerful, and others which are 2 to 3 times more powerful. To give you an idea of a standard 20 megaton strike in terms of impact area, you have a radius of 50 to 60 kilometers where you have nothing living due to the blast and thermal radiation. In fact, you have a sharp rise in temperature that causes extremely severe burns. Then you have very dangerous fallout over about 500 kilometers depending on the weather. In a 20 megaton explosion, you have an immediate destruction of 400 square kilometers. So basically with one strike, you destroy an urban community like Lyon, Marseille, or Bordeaux in one fell swoop almost instantly. So with a standard surface strike, you will be pretty much safe beyond 500 kilometers. You would be in a less dangerous area, let's say, if you are a bit lucky with the weather. The first thing is, you're going to have to act quickly. From the moment you are informed or you feel or you have heard the nuclear type detonation, you have about 15 minutes to shelter in place. So there, you have 2 cases, the cases where you are at your home and the cases where you are not at your home. So when you are not at your home, if you are in a car, for example, you will need to find an underground parking lot as quickly as possible, and you will need to go down as far as possible in this underground parking lot. So underground parking lots, there are other issues related to that because you have ventilations, but overall, it's still that remains an interesting solution. If you cannot return to your home within 15 minutes and you do not have an underground parking lot, you must leave your vehicle. It should be noted that all people who will be caught in traffic jams or who will be on the road in their vehicle at that time will suffer heavy radiation and will quickly die from their injuries. So the different refuges that you can find when you are outside are the cellars, the parking lots, the large buildings, the underground parking concrete buildings, the subway and all that, as low as possible. In the case where you are in a car, you can also have equipment that will be very useful to you. We'll see that later. When you have found your shelter, know that you must stay inside for a minimum of 72 hours. You'll have to make do with what's available. If you go outside during these 72 hours, you will have no chance of survival. After these 72 hours, the chances are much higher. The second scenario is the case where you are at home or you were able to get back home within 15 minutes. So that's the most favorable case. There's a procedure to follow, but you need to know that you're facing 3 weeks of confinement if you want to significantly increase your chances of survival. After 3 weeks, radiation levels are no longer deadly, but they remain very dangerous and you could consider evacuation. So the less favorable the weather is, meaning if you have rain, snow, and wind, the better it will be because it will disperse the radioactive ash. And it will help to clean up, so to speak, the perimeter more quickly. So now the procedure when you are at home, if you enter, undress, and get rid of your clothes as quickly as possible. You can put them in a plastic bag, but put them outside of your home. You can also hastily put them outside loosely in an emergency. Do not touch your nose, do not rub your ears or eyes if you were outside and you have come home. However, you will need to wash carefully, starting with the eyes, the nose, the ears, using wipes. It's the first wash. You need wipes at your home. Clean your entire body with wipes, then move to a second wash, a shower with soap, but basic soap. You should know that you have combined washing agents that can amplify the problems. So basic soap, Marseille soap, is very good. Then you absolutely have to turn off the VMCs. The vents, close everything, and seal all openings with plastic and tape that you must have in stock. The purpose of this is to minimize your exposure to radioactive dust as much as possible. So in an emergency, you can take care of a small room in your home. Later, if everything goes well, you can enlarge your living space. So after the shock wave, it's the first 24 hours that are really the most dangerous. So the big dust particles are there, and those are very toxic, very contaminating. Then you have finer dust particles that are normally a bit less so. If you're expecting people at home, you'll need to help the arriving people by arming yourself with masks and simple masks, construction masks, for example, filtering face piece particles too, to help people decontaminate. So know that if you have contaminated people, there will be a syndrome. So the syndrome, it starts with nausea. So if they have nausea, they've been contaminated. It's not a good sign. If you have vomiting, it's already that they have been heavily contaminated. And if you have diarrhea, seizures, disorientation, then they have been really heavily contaminated. And in this context, they will normally die quite quickly within a few hours. So during these 3 weeks of confinement, what can you expect? Presumably, you will no longer have water, electricity, telephone, television, and internet. So it's possible that you might still have some flows working, but presumably expect to have nothing anymore. You might be cold because there will be a lot less sunlight due to the radioactive ashes. Everything that comes from outside will be contaminated, or you will have to consider it as contaminated. So you can no longer heat yourself, for example, with wood that would have been stored outside. You can no longer take fruits or vegetables coming from outside. Let's now see how to prepare. So you will need canned food for a month. At least a month's supply of bottled water. You should know that running water, if you still have it. You can use it. It is recommended to only use it for washing, but definitely not for drinking. Then you will need blankets, candles, plastic tarps, tape, a very basic FM radio with the least amount of electronics possible, like this one, and it's self-sufficient. Next, you'll need filtering face piece particles, 2 masks and wipes, and everything you would need for your daily life. It is important to consider that the longer you maintain self-sufficiency, the greater your chances of survival will be. So before leaving now for these next 3 weeks, you'll need to monitor the weather and keep track of news via the FM radio you'll have. So this FM radio may malfunction for a few days when you have the radioactive ashes. It will crackle and then it will stop working. After that, it will gradually start working again. It's the only device that should, in theory, still work. Before going out, you have to be sure that there are no new strikes, and don't go out if there are ashes outside if possible. When you go out, you should wear minimum mask filtering face piece particles. 2, that you have in stock building goggles and dress as fully covered as possible. A job you will have to do beforehand is to have a good perception of your geographical environment. So note areas that might be likely to be bombed, such as airports, especially urban centers, major regional capitals. Personnel. Know if you have potential shelters in your area. Also know the location of nuclear power plants. Also inquire about the general wind pattern in your area. Consider that all radioactive dust will spread in the direction of the wind. So before your evacuation, you will need to have noted the wind direction for 3 weeks. This will allow you to avoid the contaminated area and evacuate to a less dangerous area. So by the way, avoid areas where you have nuclear power plants, which under these conditions could pose a problem. So generally, we take a radius of 50 kilometers to be safe. So a note now on iodine pills, you should know that they only fight radioactive iodine. You should also know that when you have a nuclear strike, there are numerous radionuclides that are disseminated throughout space. And sometimes radioactive iodine is not even present. So iodine pills, it's important to have them when you're around a nuclear power plant. If consequently to nuclear strikes or even conventional ones, there are leaks at a power plant, at that point taking stabilized iodine is indicated. In an emergency, your goal would therefore be to get out of this 500-kilometer zone to assess the situation. And with a bit of luck, you will be lightly contaminated. So now, we're going to quickly look at the equipment that I have here that could prevent 3 weeks of confinement. Indeed, if you equip yourself correctly, you can get out after 3 days, depending on the situation more or less. So now we are going to have a nuclear biological chemical suit. This one is a suit from the United Kingdom's Army. From what I remember, so they are cocooned. They are from 1991, a bit old, but I already opened some a short while ago. They are in perfectly preserved condition. So you have the top and the bottom. Then you will need gloves with high coverage, and that are made for chemicals. You need boots, good boots. All this equipment, it's better if it's new. You will need to have a good quality gas mask. Adjust it. It's better if it's new as well. Adjust it in advance. You will need tape. Now this is tape of this type, reinforced. It's the best. It usually is more waterproof. You can also take marine quality tape like this one. Now you will need to tape the gloves onto your jacket, and you will have to tape the pants to your boots. Then you have the filters. So the filters, take the best there is in terms of filters in the series on the brand you have. Take the filters that are broad spectrum, the broadest possible spectrum in terms of contaminant filtration. That's it for this quick rundown. So I apologize in advance for this topic, which is not cheerful. It's even anxiety-inducing, but I think it was important that you be informed and know that with these basic measures, you will significantly increase your chances of survival in the most favorable cases. I'll see you soon for a future video.